Let's read this topic and let's see what they want us to do. A coin is tossed 3 times. An outcome is represented by a string of the sort HTT, meaning a head on the first toss, followed by 2 tails. The 8 outcomes are listed in the table below. Note that each outcome has the same probability. For each of the 3 events in the table, check the outcomes that are contained in the event. Then, in the last column, enter the probability of the event. Okay, so let's see. Event A, a tail on the first toss or the second toss or both. So for this event, they want us to figure out which string here, so like THT or TTH, so which one of these represents a tail on the first toss or the second toss. So to understand how to interpret this, so let's look at the first example, THT. THT means you, and let me bring up some coins here. So we have tails and here we have heads. So THT would means that you would get tails first, then followed by heads, and then let me get another tails. So this combination here represents tails, heads, tails. That's what THT means. And they want us to determine, did we get a tail on the first toss? So did we get a tail on the first toss? Let me put a little note here. Don't forget, this is the first toss, this is my second, and this is my third. So when I read event A, I'm just checking, did I meet those conditions? Did we get a tail on the first toss? Check, we did get that. Or the second toss. So as long as it's true for one, it's on the, you have a tails on the first or the second, you are going to put a check in that box. So THT, so again, remember, this is THT because T is tails, it landed on tails, then it landed on heads, then it landed on tails. So I can see here that I do have a tail on the first toss. Therefore, I would put a check on that box. And then, I'd repeat the process. So now, you can see, let me just reorganize these. You can see in the second one now it says TTH, which means you have tails, tails, heads. So do I have a tail on the first toss or the second toss? So yes, I have it on the first and the second toss in this case. So I put a check because I do have a tail in one of them. So all you're looking for is you have a tails at least in one of the first or second spots. And then you continue doing the same thing for the rest. So if I look at here, I'm only really considering the first or the second. So if I underline these two, I ask myself, do I have tails present in either of those tosses? And in the second one here, I do. So I'd put a check. Then I underline the first 2 tosses. They're both heads. So this is no. So I don't check that box. Here I can see I have a tails on the second toss. So this will be yes. I have a tail on the first and second. So this is also yes. Tails or heads. So I can see I have a tails on the first toss. So yes. And here we have heads and heads in both tosses. Tails is not present in either one. So this is not checked off. And then that leads us to the last part, the probability. Probability that we get a tail on the first toss or the second toss, or both. So I'm just going to show you that the probability is going to be how many cases did we have a tails on the first or the second or both. And I count out, there's a total of 6 check marks. So that means it came out 6 times out of how many total? There was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different outcomes altogether. So 6 out of 8 would be my probability. And of course, I'm going to simplify this. They're each divisible by 2. And I would get 3 over 4. So that is my probability that I'll put in here, 3 out of 4 times. For event B, they're asking us to check for 2 or more heads. So notice that we're not looking at if it's the first, second, or third toss. We're just looking at we have 2 or more heads that actually happen in out of the 3 tosses. So let's look at the first situation. We have tails followed by heads. So let me just reorganize this. Tails, heads, tails. So now we're looking for, in the 3 tosses, do we have 2 or more heads? I can see here that heads only came out in the second toss. It didn't come out in the first or the third. So I don't have 2 or more heads. Therefore, in the first situation, I don't check the box. The next situation we have is TTH. Remember, that means tails, tails, heads. So if I just move these around, I can see that this is the situation we're looking at now. And I look at it again. So how many times did heads come out? It only came out in the third toss. It did not come out here or here. And again, we're looking for 2 or more heads. Therefore, we don't check the second box. And then we're going to continue. So you can see that all you really have to do is look at the outcomes. So now HTT. So we're looking for 2 heads or more. In other words, that means 2 heads or 3 heads, because 2 or more means 2 or 3 times. And I can see in this scenario here, heads only came out once, so I don't count that one. In this one, heads came out twice, so it came out here and here, not this third time. So I would actually check this box, because again, we were looking for 2 or more. Here it came out twice, therefore I checked this box. Here it did not come out at all. And in this one we have heads twice, so I checked this box. And in the last situation, heads came out 3 times, so I checked that box. So again, we just looked at all the situations where we had heads 2 or more times. And then I find my probability. How many times did we get 2 or more heads? And I can see I have 4 check boxes out of a total of how many outcomes possible? It was 8. And if I were to simplify this, these are each divisible by 4. That's the greatest common factor of 4 and 8. And I simplify this to 1/2. So my answer I'll put here is 1/2. In event C, it says we're looking for a tail on both the first and the last tosses. So in this one, a tail is on both the first and the last tosses. So if I were to look at these coins down here, that means that you're looking for this. You want tail on the first and the last tosses. So this is one combination we're looking for. It could be tails, heads, tails. But this is not the only way that a tail can come out on both the first and the last one. This is the other way that tails can come out on both the first and the last tosses, where you just get tails all the time. So you don't have to really draw these out. Again, you can go back and you can check your outcomes here, which is THT, TTH, and you're looking just for tails on both the first and last. So basically, we're just paying attention to the first and the last. And as long as there's tails on both of those, then we put a check. So that one would count. This one is tails and heads on the first and last, so that one would not count. Here we have heads and tails, so no. Heads and tails again, so that's a no. Heads and heads. And again, we're only paying attention to the first and last tosses. Here we have tails and tails, so that one counts. And then tails and heads, so that's no. And heads and heads, so that's also no. So as I showed you down here, you can see there's only 2 different ways that tails will come out in the first and last toss. Therefore, I'll show the probability over here. Tails on both the first and last tosses came out twice out of a total of 8 possibilities. And here, the greatest common factor of 2 and 8 is 2. I can divide them each by 2, and I get 1/4. So my answer I'll put here is 1/4 for my probability. And that's it. This is how you figure out the event of an outcome.